guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to No Limits, a Mid-Trap podcast. So what are you up to this day, Mike?
Not much. Been a relaxing weekend. It's getting cold out, but try to fire up the fire pit in the yard tonight. How about you? I know you've had a lot going on, wrapping up and getting your thesis done.
Yeah, I finally submitted that on Friday. That was a big relief. Sent it off to my committee. A week from then, I defend my thesis in front of a lot of people because it's going to be virtual. So my boss has been sending out the Zoom link to everybody. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to being done, getting it over with.
Yes, sir. You deserve it. Worked hard at that. Many, many years.
Too many years.
Yeah. Hey, well, this is where we always shout out our patrons, and we thank you for supporting this podcast. But we also want to shout out all of our listeners. We are very appreciative of you guys tuning in every week, interacting with us on Twitter, social media. And the biggest way you can help give back and help out this podcast is to subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcast player. If you could, it would mean a lot just to go in, leave us 5 stars, maybe write a short review if you're enjoying this podcast. So open up that Apple Podcast app. It's always nice reading those. So very much appreciated to all our listeners.
Yes. Shout out to everybody.
All right. What are we covering today, Chris?
Well, today we're going to be covering the second half of our discussion on the 5th book in the Mid-Trap Saga and the 6th book in the Vince Flynn universe, and that is Memorial Day. Last week we discussed the beginning of the first book, covering all the way up to just past the middle, where I think we left off and everyone had just foiled what they thought was the big nuke plot, capturing the first nuke. And yeah, we're going to cover the rest of it and give you our final ratings. High praise, a lot of flowers for this book. Talk about our winners and losers and our much anticipated cover situation for this novel.
Yes, I always look forward to that with you.
Yeah, that's one of the highlights of doing these pods. So,
all right,
let's dive right into it, though.
This second half of the book opens up with the terrorists in action. And it turns out, Rapp was right. There's got to be more to this plot. There's a backup plan. So, to give you a little quote of what Al-Yamani is working on, Vince writes, "Everything Al-Yamani had put together was now in jeopardy. But at least he had been careful to keep the mission compartmentalized. The left hand did not need to know what the right hand was doing. The Americans had dealt him a serious blow, but this operation was far from over. Al-Yamani didn't travel all the way to America with his hopes pinned on just one plan. He was a military tactician, and the best strategies were always multi-pronged."
All about compartmentalization. That's a key, right? Making sure, like Hydra, you chop off one head and two appear. You know, I've been watching a lot of Marvel movies lately, so...
Well, I was going to connect it to Total Power with the redundancy of the grid, being balkanized. But then also another thing about Total Power that Kyle gets right, that's very much in Vince's style, is to show how the enemy is adapting.
Yes. Yeah, and I think he even mentions at one point, or Al-Yamani mentions through Vince's writing, that he was okay with just having an attack like in Charleston, if the nuke just went off in Charleston, or like his, sort of offhand. And I think it's implied that the second nuke, if like let's say they can't get into Washington, they can't explode it into the kill the president, then they're just going to take it up to Baltimore.
Yeah.
Just any sort of attack of that magnitude would wreak havoc on the economy and instill this fear in real terrorism.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, well, we start off this second part we're introduced, very quickly to this guy, Joe Gomez. He's just a truck driver. He thinks is a weird delivery to a construction site because it's granite and nothing's really happened at the construction site. But and then he thinks he's going to make it home for his son's baseball game, but instead he passes out. We find out later that he actually died of acute radiation poisoning because in his load, being shielded by the granite is nuclear material for a second nuclear weapon. So this is interesting because obviously this is highly, this guy dies pretty quickly. He was probably driving in front of it for, from Mexico to Atlanta. I think, we know that Al-Yamani is dying from his symptoms of being exposed to radiation, and it's like I don't really know the science of how quickly you're exposed to it and what you can get away with. Like Zubair is super freaked out about this unshielded nuclear material. He even tries to go on these great lengths to try to prevent himself, buying all these lead aprons and lead weights from discarded elevators. They go to all these lengths to then shield the material, because if they don't, then apparently there are these sensors that are going to pick it up if they get close to the city, right?
Yeah, I found that interesting, and I was trying to find a little bit more about it, but Reimer, in charge of the DOE, is really confident that any trucks carrying, nuclear material or radioactive material would be picked up. I guess that includes major bridges coming into DC. Reimer was really confident that the sensors were strong enough. And I just never considered, because I crossed the DC border into both Maryland and Virginia, weekly, right? To go to work, I'm doing it every day, driving over the bridges. There's just a lot of ways in and out. And so I was just wondering how accurate that is, that the DOE chief would be confident that road sensors could pick up material in a truck. But Zubair is shielding it. So yeah, again, Al-Qaeda is adapting by hiring a scientist and actually using Western-educated people to help them finish the mission here.
Yeah, I tried to Google some, more information on the sensors, what they look like. I couldn't find much. I'm guessing that's purposeful, so that way people can't circumnavigate these sensors. But yeah, that was interesting to me.
I couldn't find a lot on roads, like you were saying, but I found a helicopter. And they're going to use it, actually, I think, in just the coming weeks to get ready for the inauguration. I saw that Department of Energy radiation sensor on this helicopter. They informed citizens and residents that they're going to be flying low in a grid pattern over the city. So they're kind of doing that in advance of the inauguration. So I think that would be the typical way, you would do it. But apparently Vince is writing that there's sensors at the bridges and stuff, which would be pretty neat to learn more about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Zubair has met up with Al-Yamani, as we mentioned. They have this nuclear material. He's been able to shield it. They meet up with two other of Al-Yamani's accomplices, and they begin to make their way north. And I think eventually they drive to Virginia, where they're going to meet up with their final accomplice, who's, going to give them, he's been holding this material for the fire sets and in order to actually create an actual bomb, right?
They'll assemble it somewhere in Virginia on the way to DC. Yep. Well, that's the terrorist storyline and how they're prepping and getting ready for this second wave attack, or this backup attack. And meanwhile, a lot is happening in DC. So
yes,
we have a couple of storylines going on. One of the main ones is Steely. Peggy Steely is still trying to advance her career. If you remember, she was the hotshot lawyer working for the Attorney General. Well, she has been asked to liaise with the FBI and the counterterrorism teams at the JCTC. So she meets up with Skip there, and they butt heads a little bit, but Skip, working for the FBI and, being a true bureaucrat now, he knows how to handle her and kind of play the moment. Game. In the moment, he plays the game. He doesn't go too hard or aggressive. The problem comes when they go to interview one of the terrorists they picked up at the Charleston dock. If you remember, a truck driver came to pick up the shipment, and thanks to RAP, not causing a panic and not having them close down the port, they're able to apprehend the drivers. Well, unfortunately, before Skip and Steely can get too far, a lawyer comes in. He has already gotten protection from Tony Jackson, whose nickname is Mouth of the South, a hotshot civil rights attorney who tells his client not to speak. He won't be answering any questions, and he's very disappointed in the JCTC for already trying to ask questions of his client.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, this is going to slow things down in getting intelligence, which is desperately needed right now.
Yeah, this whole action of giving, and I guess these two guys are American citizens, so giving these two American citizens their right to have an attorney really sends Mitch off. Like, this is one of the focal points in the second half of the novel where he's like, I can't believe, you're allowing these terrorists to have, they've been implicated in a nuclear weapon. They were literally about to pick up a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought, like, why? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, like, due process. But if I was told, like, wouldn't the FBI just tell the lawyer that these guys picked up a nuke? I guess you can't do that.
FBI, I don't think so. Like, you hear about due process being suspended in national emergencies or threats to homeland security, but that's all like CIA stuff. I feel like FBI, they still play by the book, and that's why Skip's hands are tied here.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's true though. As American citizens, does terrorism mean the Constitution and due process doesn't apply? And if so, how do you define terrorism? Is picking up a shipment that you possibly did not know what was in it constitute as you were involved in a terrorist plot? So who knows? Don't they deserve due process in their day in court?
I guess so. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we know how Rapp feels, right? So
yes.
I mean, here's Rapp talking to Irene about it. He says, Irene, you know me. I could give a rat's ass about politics and 99% of the crap that goes on in this town. But come on, these guys were involved in a plot to set off a nuclear bomb in Washington. And I'm being told by the FBI that I can't talk to them because they've got a lawyer? And Kennedy, of course, says, I don't like this any more than you do, but now that it's public, this is how it is. And Rapp has an idea. He says, I'll tell you how to handle it. We take away their U.S. citizenship based on the fact they came to America with the intent of launching a terrorist attack. Then we put the screws to them until they give up every damn accomplice and piece of information we need. So he's going to pitch that to the president. Can't we just revoke their citizenship? Again, not a lawyer, but man, that seems pretty extreme to me.
Rapp has a certain way of doing things, and
that he does.
That's what he wants done.
He's effective. He's effective.
It sort of also is a side note to the idea of, like, does torture, is torture justified? And it's something we can talk about later, and we talked about in last book. But obviously, like, to this point, Rapp's been able to gain a lot of information through his ways, and we're going to highlight a scene in just a little bit where Rapp explains very bluntly to the president, how he was able to get the information to save his life and lives of many, right?
Yeah, that's it. Deep questions, man.
Yes, deep questions. So, Rapp is back. He's pissed. They meet with the president and the national security team in the White House, and we learn that potentially this nuclear material is of Soviet design, right? And this then sends a trickle effect to actually working with Russia in order to determine, where this came from, and because Reimer is now thinking that there's something else. Like, this was I think he's like, this is too easy. Second of all, they know that there exists, like, I think he says, like 12 or 19 potential, because these were all the material that they were able to get were from failed test trials over in Russia, right? So
yeah, and that's because they found another map, a map of the North Caspian Sea. Yes. In the raid in Pakistan. And so now that they're going through all this intelligence, like, what the hell is here? And I think someone is able to confirm with the Russian government that, in the Soviet Union, we had a test site in southern Kazakhstan on the Caspian Sea, back then Soviet Union, and some nuclear material is unaccounted for. We thought we buried it deep enough. It would take an army of men to come dig it out without us knowing. Well, it turns out Al-Yamani had that network, and he was crossing the Caspian from Iran and collecting that material. So there's more.
Yeah, so it's just past this meeting in the White House where, Rapp goes off the handle. He's yelling at Steele, can't believe you gave them lawyers, yada, yada, yada. That he then meets privately with the president and Irene, and I think Jones is there too. And there's these two quotes that I just wanted to read where, Rapp sort of lays it in to the president, right? He says, first, next time a group of Islamic radical fundamentalists try to blow up Washington, D.C., you might want to consult your entire national security team, including the director of the CIA, and place a little less emphasis on the advice you receive from your attorney general, who, by the way, is looking to make a name for himself so he can be your running mate in the upcoming election. So the guy's motivations are not 100% genuine. He is doing what he's doing because we know that what Stokes' end goal is, right?
Yeah.
The president, sort of fires back. There's this sort of weak line where he says, "You're on thin ice," acting like a father to Mitch, which I thought was kind of funny. But then this is one of my favorite quotes in the books. Both me and you highlighted it, where he says, "Mr. President, you sit here in a vacuum with all these sycophants and so-called experts running around you, advising you, but they never stop to realize that you came within a whisper of being incinerated by a nuclear bomb," right? And he tells him that, "You know how we found out that information about the nuclear material? Well, we pulled 5 prisoners out of that village, and none of them were willing to talk. And by the way, I only brought back 3 of them, right, or 2 of them." And he says, "I got them to talk by, I started with a guy named Al Hurry. I put a gun to his head, and when he refused to answer my questions, I blew his brains out. I executed the bastard, and I didn't feel an ounce of shame or guilt." And then he says he moved on to the next terrorist, blew his brains out too, and the third guy in line started singing like a bird. So this is Rapp's way, but I mean, he gets the job done, right? And this is his whole point, right? That you need, in order to gain actionable material, you have to be willing to take certain steps.
Yeah.
I'm not the one to condone those certain steps, but I do think there has to be some sort of give and take in these kind of situations, right?
Well, Rapp needed to do that because that conversation privately with the president came right at a time where the president was resting on his laurels. He was pushing Kennedy out of some of these conversations or sidelining her. He was much more likely to listen to the attorney general about due process for the terrorists. Let's make sure we look good in the public, in the media, the public eye. And he was even starting to not really listen to Reimer and the people at the DOE, scared about more nuclear radiation out there. It's a wake-up call, right? Whether or not you agree with Rapp and his way of, maybe you might say, abusing the Constitution, you at least agree with him in coming in at the right moments and at the right time, calling a spade, and saying, "Mr. President, you still have to be a leader. These people, the director of your CIA should be in on the conversation. Don't just have these politicos in your ear, completely swaying you one way." And so it's a wake-up call the president needs.
I think it's also, Rapp and Irene sort of shield the president from a lot of these things, right?
Yeah.
And, he typically doesn't know what, he just cares about that they found the nuke. But I think he needs to hear these things. Obviously, He probably knows what Mitch does. He knows vague dealings of Mitch Rapp, but actually hearing, and he does this in front of Jones too, who this actually is what gets her in trouble, because she then is like, "Oh, we can use this information to get Rapp out," and which rightly the DNC fights back against. He's like, "If you want to stay in this fucking town, you need to cool it on trying to get Rapp out of town," which I kind of liked of Holmes.
Yeah. Well, Valerie Jones, chief of staff, and Peggy Steele from the AG's office start going off on Rapp, like privately with the DNC. They start mouthing off. They're gonna get him. They're gonna get the president to fire him. They're gonna make sure he never gets to see the White House again. It's like Jones and Steele think their political agenda can run everything, and DNC Holmes tells them, "Slow your roll. Like, you don't want to go up against Rapp, and if you do, I'm done with our little meetings. Right. I'm done with our little, plans."
He lays it out that people on both sides of the aisle agree with Rapp, and obviously, it was a joint venture between a bunch of terrorists, a bunch of senators in the past to start the Orion team, and so there's no way Rapp's going anywhere, and these guys would be idiots to think that they could, take him down like that.
Yep. This is the point of the book where everything starts ramping up. So the stage has been set. We're back with the terrorists. From here to the end of the book, I would say maybe the final quarter, 25%, is absolutely incredible. I love this whole sequence. So
the pacing is great.
The pacing is perfect. There's action that's both drawn out, like action you really want to savor over the course of 5-10 chapters, but then there's also action that's nonstop, where every page, every sentence, you're on the edge and can't put it down. So you get a nice blend of pacing that's really quick and pacing that's slower, but still hooking you. And What I mean by that is the terrorists are in Virginia. They just met up with one of al-Yamani's other accomplices in Richmond, and they have the truck. The truck which has the shielded nuclear material. The cops pull them over, and al-Yamani is watching from behind in a second vehicle. And he sees this cop talking to the drivers, and he's about to check their licenses. Well, al-Yamani decides to kick things into gear, revs the engine, guns down, drives through this cop, knocks him over. Him and the truck take off, and now we have a manhunt. So the officer is able to call it in. He's able to get on the radio that there's a hit and run. Al-Yamani's listening on the police scanner, so he's able to direct the truck away from the police roadblocks and barricades. But we have a massive manhunt across all of southeastern Virginia. And Yamani decides, we got to lay low. They're casting a wide net, got to lay low. They eventually head into a coastal neighborhood up on the York River, so an easy way to access the Chesapeake Bay. And they pull up to a house. They get the truck into the garage. They are going to hide, and they're going to stay low. And this is also going to give them a chance to assemble the nuke. Remember, they have the scientist Zubair. They're in the middle of a residential neighborhood. They've got everything hidden away in this garage. And they, unfortunately, have to kill this couple. I think, is it the woman or the man who's home? I don't remember exactly.
It's the woman's at home, and then the man arrives, and he ends up having a heart attack, and then they end up killing the woman later on. But yeah, this scene was interesting, and obviously, originally, before they had to sort of divert and kill that cop, or run the cop over, and they were going to go find a boat. But then they figure they use this opportunity. They're driving along the York River, and a lot of these houses just have boats. So the terrorists are thinking on the fly, improvising. But it's all I like how I like how Vince puts all these little. There's a reason why Rapp and Co are able to catch them, because they slip up and they have to cause an accident with the cop, but they don't kill him. So he's able to give them information about him, which allows them to narrow their search. Yeah. They realized where they were, and the cops had the ability to find them if they went one way. So they have to be in like this one area. So yeah, I like these little nuggets, which are slowly. It's not like at the end like Rapp just thinks, oh, like we found the people. It's a logical progression in terms of how we find these terrorists.
Yeah, I mean Rapp and Skip also kick the manhunt into gear and start working with the local authorities, because Reimer finds this dead, or it's reported that there's this dead truck driver who just checked into a hospital. I think still down near Atlanta. Turns out the hospital reported there was acute radiation symptoms, like you said. That's when Reimer says, crap, there is a second device. Calls in Rapp and Skip. So now you've got the whole entire thing. You've got the feds, you've got the CIA, you've got all local authorities and state police in Virginia casting this net. So, yep, they've narrowed it down. They pretty much know the area they're looking for, but they're still looking for a truck.
Yes.
And the terrorists are taking their time to assemble the weapon and load it onto a boat. So I don't think the authorities yet and Rapp have figured out they're coming by boat up the Chesapeake and into the Potomac River. They're still kind of checking the roads.
Right. So it's this next part where we get this sort of adventures of Skip McMahon and Mitch Rapp, which I kind of liked. And, we get to see a different side of Skip. He's a FBI guy, very by the letter of the book. But here he goes along with Rapp to find this guy who has a lawyer, Al Liddell. They go to the jail he's being held at in Virginia and pick him up. And originally their plan was to take him to Akram and, using Akram's ways, hopefully get information out of him. But as soon as Reimer sort of informs him that their one is a second nuke, that sort of speeds everything up. And then, because of when they go to the jail, there's a slip up. The security guard actually lets the attorney know. Yeah. That then speeds up everything. So Rapp has to think on the fly and act quickly. And
well, the attorney.
Yes, sorry.
The attorney slipped the business card to the guards. I love that little detail, because like Rapp and Skip are like, yo, cut the cameras. they know a guy. They're like, don't tell anyone we're here. This guard is willing to like let them in, slip under the radar. But then another one of the guards remembered this lawyer. And the lawyer was like, hey, if you help me take care of my client, down the road, I'm going to need some private security work done. Right. So give me a call if you ever want to get a nice cushy contract, do some private work for me. Just don't let anybody near my client. And unfortunately, that guy calls the lawyer. And so Rap and Skip got to speed up.
They got to speed it up, and they do that by this is kind of interesting scene. They throw him in the pool. First he's given a stimulant, which like is supposed to heighten his like fears and stuff like that, and then throw him in the pool. Apparently, a lot of people from I didn't know this. Like people, I guess I should know that because I have a friend who's from Saudi Arabia and she couldn't swim, but I guess in that culture it's just not something that like everyone in America pretty much learns how to swim, right? So this guy doesn't know how to swim. And Rap uses it to his advantage to gain information. And this is where they find out, one, it's sort of a bomb drops, a literal bomb, drops that the bomb they did get was not intended for the DC. It was actually intended for New York City. And that the second bomb out there is the one that's intended for Washington, D.C., right?
Yeah. They thought the first one, coming into Charleston, driven up the coast, could get to D.C., but no, it was going to go all the way to New York. While the terrorist is in the pool, though, you got to point out, Rap can use anything as a weapon. He uses the pool skimmer to hold him underwater, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he pushes him down with the skimmer.
I was like envisioning that in my head, and it was a pretty funny scene.
Yeah. Although hearing that the second nuke is intended for DC, one of your first calls is Jack Warch. I think it's Kennedy who immediately gets in touch with him. Says, hey, new intel is DC's the target. Immediately, they're in Virginia. Get the president out of there. And so This is the second time, right? They institute a continuity of government plan.
And it's evacuate. not quite a continuity of government.
That's right. This one's more nuanced.
Yeah, nuanced. Yeah.
This was a smart play. Was it? I think it's Rap's idea. He tells Irene and Warch. He goes, hey, this is what we're going to do. And this is where they talk about golf, right?
His Rap's plan is that to sort of, because they already did the one thing, they can't just do a drill again or whatever.
The press would shit the bed.
The president and the British prime minister and the Russian president are supposed to go back to Camp David to squeeze in another round of golf. A typical Chris move, and that's going to be the way, because Camp David is a secure site, right? So it's on the way to this meeting where he's calling Warch, and meanwhile, everyone else has found out that Rap and Skip have been doing this stuff, and they think that they have it now. They already had this information about what Rap has done. They thought Steely and co. they're going to be able to tell the president, we can nail him, and so much so that Rap and Skip purposely tell their bosses, do not tell any information about the second nuke, what we figured out. Let them sort of, lay
shoot themselves in the foot.
Exactly.
Dig a hole.
And then I love Rap is like, are you done?
Yep.
Yep. And then they lay it all out, and the president is like, all right, good idea, Rap. And then he goes with Rap and decides, like, we're going to Camp David, right?
Yep. There's another scene there's a couple of scenes where I love Peggy Steely's world falling apart, where she realizes she's late to the game, that this evacuation is happening and that a nuke can go off, but they made her one of the last ones to call. So she's rushing, to get out of the house and pack a bag, and like she's wearing, I don't know if it's pajamas or whatever, but casual clothes. She can't grab her makeup or any of her stuff. And so she's going to be the most disheveled and unkept one who arrives at Camp David. Yeah.
There's another scene where like she shows up, and because she doesn't have people yet, because she's like, oh, at least the president, we're both looking disheveled. But the steward walks in and brings him a new suit, and she's still like wearing, her crappy, not crappy, but obviously looks disheveled, right?
Yeah.
These the little nuanced things that Vince puts in are very very nice.
Compare that to her opening in the beginning when she was described as like this whirlwind. She will come in and just like destroy everybody else's world and turn everyone else upside down. And now she's being the one turned upside down while Rap and the president are saving the world, essentially.
Exactly.
Man, so the action's already been pretty hot so far, but it only gets better. I think
this last, like, from chapter 84 on,
it's unreal.
It's just, I was listening to it by audiobook, and like every chapter is only like 4 minutes, and I listened to it on 1.75 speed, so it's just going fast. Bam, boom, 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 and it's really good.
I mean, this was the part, I think it's probably like midnight, 1 a.m. where I hit about this point, and I'm like, nope, I'm staying up. That's it. I'm getting to the end. Doesn't matter. So I think I'm reading this at like 2, 3 a.m. and I was like, not putting it down. It's one of those. But It's crazy. It's exciting. So the Nest team finally discovers that the house the terrorists were using did have radiation signs. And the way they got there was kind of a lucky break. A woman who lives in the neighborhood saw a truck, and the truck looked the exact same as her son's truck. And so when she turns on the news, she sees police chasing him, she's like, oh no, what the hell did he do? And then it turns out it's part of a terrorist plot, and they put it together. And so she calls and goes, yeah, I saw that truck. I thought it was my son's, but it must be this one on TV. And that indeed was the truck. And it was their neighbor's house where they stole the boat. So the Nest team is analyzing the radiation signatures. They know it's hot. I think Rapp gets called and is like, the bomb was here, but we don't see anybody. We just have this dead couple, and their son is here, and he's freaking out. He's so upset. And Rapp's like, give me a full description of the scene. Like, don't leave out a detail. Tell me everything. And they're like, oh, nice suburban house, big driveway, garage, all this stuff. And then he thinks
it's on the river.
It's on the river. And then one of them is like, yeah, it's right on the river behind the house. And Rapp goes, ask the son if he has a boat, if his parents have a boat. And the son's like, yeah, they have a boat. And Rapp's like, go to the docks now. And the boat's not there.
And this is when he pieces it together, yeah.
Yep, this is where it kicks into gear. He knows they're on the water. He knows they're coming up the Chesapeake. They call in the choppers. On the fly, Rapp's going to put together this plan. So he's in the air in one chopper. They're coming from D.C. They're going to start and move south along the west bank of the river, while another chopper is going to start in D.C. on the Anacostia River, which branches east, and they're going to come south on the east bank. That way they can fly a little bit off the center of the river so the boat doesn't see them. They're kind of over land, a little hidden, but they can still have full view. Well, one of the choppers radios in that they see the boat. They ID it. And what's really cool is they know at this point about the size and the container it's in, and it turns out it's in a cooler attached to the back of the boat. And Rapp sees the name of the boat. It's partially hidden by a cooler, and he says, why is the name hidden? That's the cooler with the nuke. Comes in low, looks at it, that's them. Immediately, he calls a plan. Hey, they're headed northbound, about to go under the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. You know, the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, about 5 minutes from my house, is where 495, the Beltway, crosses the river. You have to cross it to get into D.C., and you're probably still a couple miles out.
Right.
So it's going to take
6 miles out.
6 miles out, it's going to take them 15, 20 minutes, on the river to get there. So Rapp says, all right, one chopper is going to hover parallel to the bridge on the northbound side of it where they can't be seen. He takes his chopper to the foot of the bridge at Jones Point Park, drops some men off there. Does he drop a sniper there?
Yeah, he drops
or a team to watch. He drops a sniper. And then so they're a little lighter. He gets ready to take off. As the boat comes under the bridge, the chopper that's parallel, hiding behind the far side of the bridge, is now perpendicular to the boat. And so Rapp gets a perfect shot on the two guys steering the boat. And then the chopper moves horizontally. So the boat is going northbound. The chopper is perpendicular to it behind it, but moves with it and closes the gap just enough where Rapp can jump off from the chopper onto the boat. And that's where he's able to commandeer the boat and take it to shore and rendezvous with the men in Jones Point Park, which is pretty cool because I bike ride through Jones Point Park all the time. And I'm like, shit, if I saw two choppers and one was kind of concealing itself behind a bridge, and then this dude, hanging out the window, shoots a guy in a boat, boards it, commandeers it, I'd be like, this is insane.
No, this whole description, this is probably my favorite part of the second half. Rap's able to think of this plot or this plan of action on the fly, right?
Yep.
And using the one chopper, I think it's like the Park Service chopper to
Yep.
come in like sort of a different way, and then actually sort of draw the attention of the terrorists away from them, from Rap's copter. And then he's able to, this copter's like slowly inching out, right? Like you said, if you were like right there in Jones Point Park and watching this like unfold, that'd be crazy.
There's a bunch of dudes always fishing there. So, I mean, I'm just
sure
it would be nuts.
And it's Memorial Day weekend, so I'm sure that some fishing dude there was watching this.
Exactly. It's important, though, that Rap doesn't shoot Al-Yamani. He boards the boat so he could talk to him. And Al-Yamani thinks he got the last laugh because he lets him know the bomb is armed. And there's nobody who can disarm it. It was Zubair the scientist, the only one who knew the codes and the wiring and set it up to disarm it, who apparently was pretty good. He put in all these fail-safes. Well, Al-Yamani killed him, or at least dumped him off the boat.
I wanted this scene to be, this was like, I love this scene, but I wanted the meeting between Al-Yamani and Rap to be better. I don't know. This was like my one letdown. Like I thought because Rap like finds him down below. Obviously at this point he's really like quickly succumbing to his radiation poisoning at this point.
Sure.
It's like over the course of the book, the rapid progression of it is getting worse and worse and worse. So I don't know. I felt like, like a scene in like a James Bond novel where he finally meets up with the bad guy at the end, and he tells him, like, he just laughs that. I don't know. I just wanted the dialogue to be a little bit better, and then Rap just shoots him because he knows that this guy's dead anyway, so might as well take some frustration out.
The extracurriculars were enough for me. I didn't need that kind of drama person to person, because everything else going on in the surrounding scene was enough to keep me going. I didn't miss that.
All right, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough.
The SEALs, though, so right on shore where he takes the boat, carefully remove the cooler with the nuke. Unfortunately, they find the timer, and they estimate that they have little under an hour, and they really don't know if they can defuse it. And this is where Rap says, I need percentages.
Well, because there's like 6 firing sets on it, right? So
exactly. And when the best team in the world, I think, gives them 50-50 odds.
Yeah.
And they're in the nuclear radius where, they're obviously going to have massive
Rap says not 50-50 is not good enough.
50-50 is not cutting it. And he puts his plan into action. He starts asking, can I take it out to sea? No, because the way the current's blowing, it'll just come back over shore. If I only have 25 minutes, I'm not going to get far enough out. And then Rap starts calculating the exact distance to a bunker. We heard about so many safe locations, and so far in this book, we've been thought, oh, this is where people go to protect themselves from a blast. This is where the government goes if they need to hide out from an attack. Well, Rap flips that on its head and says, if they're nuclear defended and protected bunkers, they can also contain a blast. He gets in a chopper, heading northwest to the Appalachian Mountains, and that's where Mount Weather is. In Bluemont, Virginia. Beautiful, like, little town. Has nice wineries and vineyards, and, Rap is booking it, and he does the math. How many miles I have to go, how fast the chopper can go. He thinks he'll get there with maybe a couple of minutes to spare. And the blast doors take a good 10 minutes to open, so he gets that in motion. He's like, open the blast doors, have a Jeep ready for me. He lands that sucker right at the entrance of Mount Weather, goes in the Jeep, brings the cooler with him, drives right to the elevator shaft, pushes the button, elevator drops into the abyss, deep under the mountain. And Rap didn't tell the guy he's with.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, the guy's like, "What's in the cooler?" And he's like,
"What's in the cooler?
Let's get it in the elevator, and then I'll tell you."
I'll tell you on our way out. Floor it.
No, that was the whole end part of it was really cool, and it's interesting that he doesn't even realize, like, he doesn't feel anything. Reimer's the one who tells him,
"Yeah,
oh, we felt like we saw the seismic, explosion." That's how like good this thing. Good Reimer's like, did it go off? And he's like, you would be able to tell better than I did, or was there any secondary effects? So
he even tells the other people on the chopper, he's like, close your eyes, duck your head, this might get rough, and then nothing happens. He's like, was it a false alarm? But nope, that thing went off in the mountain and was fully concealed. minutes.
And we no longer have Mount Weather. So I guess our prediction that the site that they went to in Total Power is not Mount Weather. It's something else.
Yeah. What's his name? Kyle, it seems, made that one up, that bunker, but I think it was very much in Total Power, but I think it was very much modeled on something like a Raven Rock or a Mount Weather for sure.
Well, Flood even mentions that, it's okay to get rid of Mount Weather because it was obsolete when a year after it was completed. So
exactly, like most of these Cold War era defense systems were.
Right.
Hey, Rap, while he's on the helicopter before the epilogue, because Flynn and his epilogues are always a treat, but he makes one other call. Someone we have not heard from this whole novel, thankfully, you might say, but Anna is waiting for him. She's with her family out on one of the lakes. Is it Minnesota?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. She's from Wisconsin. And she's been pretty disappointed. Rap hasn't been there. He calls her and just says, everything's fine. I'll be there in the morning.
Right.
And Kennedy gets to go on her vacation. She meets up with Tommy and her family at the beach.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so we end the novel on the epilogue. Rap at his in-laws. We don't actually even... I think we maybe have one line from Anna this entire novel. Really interesting. We're going to talk about this when we wrap up the book, but really interesting how Vince sort of shies away from the Anna-centric plot action that we've seen in the last couple books, right? So he's in Wisconsin, and then we end the novel by having this discussion between Rap and Irene about the terrorists and, how close they got to actually achieving their goal. Like, yeah, it was a win, but like that doesn't sit right with Rap. The fact that we had to drop a nuclear bomb in our own bunker to just save the day, right? I guess this is something we often don't get in movies, right? Where, they saved the day and that's the end of the book. Like, but the actual ramifications to think about, yeah, we saved it, but they got really close and they're just going to keep coming back. And Rap is tired of all this bullshit with the political types. He goes to say, like, Irene's been trying to get him to talk to the president. The president wants to actually not out him, but say that how central of a role he played in foiling the terrorist attack, right? So he tells Irene, I have no desire to talk to the president. In fact, tell him I'm already thinking of quitting. Again, Rap constantly, like this, that's a very through line that Vince has where every novel he's thinking about getting out, right? And he says that if he mentions my name, that it's a done deal. I'm quitting, right? And he can tell every last reporter in Washington that while the rest of us were trying to stop these terrorists, he was more concerned about election year politics and listening to people like Valerie Jones, Martin Stoke, and that Steely woman from the Justice Department.
I love Kennedy's response to all this.
Yeah, what does she say?
So she's listening to Rap bitch and moan, like, tell the president you better not use my name. Don't give me any accolades. He was, he was a punk during all this, really. And Irene goes, Mitch, if there was ever a time to get him to declare open season on terrorists, this is it. And Vince writes, Rap would push for everything he can get. Irene, I want carte blanche. Tell the president I'm going to hunt down every last son of a bitch who had a hand in this attack. And I don't want anybody from the White House or the Justice Department looking over my shoulder. A mental list was forming of who and what to hit first. Soon, the religious zealots would regroup and come at them again. The outcome of this war, Mitch knew, was far from certain. There was no walking away from this fight, no sidestepping it. There was only one way to wage it, head on and with brutal and overwhelming force. Close the book.
Yeah, I mean, it does a good job at setting up, the stage for the next couple novels. So, Rap's on a mission.
You know how some of these epilogues are Rap hunting down the bad guy? Like you were talking about Rap and Al-Yamani on the boat?
Yeah.
I think it would have been less effective to make that an epilogue closure of Rap goes and finds Al-Yamani and goes, hey, how about that nuke you wanted to set off? Boom, caps him in the head. This is so much more powerful by saying it wasn't just one man. It wasn't one terrorist. I want carte blanche. I want to go hog on these people. And that's going to set up consent to kill. Instead of the closure being, I killed one guy who was responsible. End of story. Right. It's like there is no closure because it's only going to launch Rap on some more badassery in the future.
Yep. Yeah, well, that's our book.
Yeah,
so we really liked it. I just had a few questions to ask you, Mike, as I often do. General topics about the book. So the first one I was thinking of is, we've sort of touched at it a little bit. What's your theory on the justified use of torture? This plays a central point in our novel. Obviously, this is key to not only gaining information for the first nuke, but also the second nuke. Obviously, it's here, it's effective, but should it exist? It's interesting, we watched that, the CIA spy masters, right? Yep. And they say that a lot of the stuff that they gained from the black sites actually, didn't produce much intelligible stuff. And even like those psychologists who got paid a lot of money, it felt to me, watching that documentary, it felt that they were a little bit like con artists, right? They didn't even, at the end, they were sort of questioning their own, trying to do anything in order to get actual intelligence to prove that what they were doing was the right thing and giving them actual intelligence. So I don't know. Well, what are your feelings about it? And how well did it work in this novel?
Well, I think for the sake of storytelling, it's great. It's perfect, right? Because it makes you wonder, what the hell would you and I and the rest of America have thought if any one of these weapons went off? Whether they hit their intended target, New York, D.C., whether they went off in the countryside and whatever, and we knew someone was sitting in a cell that had that information, right? Like, what if you knew someone was being defended by a lawyer and the FBI and CIA wasn't allowed to talk to them and get answers, and one of these nukes go off? So I think it's just great storytelling to give you a perspective on that. Does it line up with reality and how torture may actually produce intelligence that's actionable and timely for stopping an attack? Maybe not, right? Maybe that's not a realistic thing. But if it ever were, which is what good literature should do, is address if this ever were the case. And I can see it being really close to the truth at some point in the future, if it's not, if it isn't true all the time. So it works. I think it works for the story, and I think it makes us love Rapp, our hero, and what he's willing to do. The bigger issue for me is like this whole due process. Should we throw out the Constitution, particularly when it's citizens? Because it's kind of like the death penalty. How many times have innocent people been exonerated, either after the fact or on death row? Particularly with like DNA now. So it makes you question, like, do we always have the full picture? Do we always have the right intelligence? Is the intelligence true and accurate? So it gets really murky. So I'm on both sides, right? But I love how a good story can tease that out. And I think we get Vince's perspective on it.
Yeah, and I like how, some people sort of write off these novels as, just, fun literature. But I feel like sometimes they can really get you thinking about our society, about our politics, about, stuff that happens. And, Vince obviously has his side and Kyle has his side that I feel like both of them don't do. It's some other authors obviously like very overtly put what they believe, but at least what I feel like in these novels is it allows you to think about it, and it's a little bit you can just gloss over it and just read it for what it is, and it's a thriller novel. But then you can also take it a step further, dig into these questions, and really think about it as a as it applies to reality, real life.
So true. Hey, let me ask you. Thinking about characters here.
Yep.
What do you think? We talked about a few that we liked the last novel, but let me ask, what do you think about Al-Yamani as a villain and the team he's assembled? Whether it's these college kids, right, living in America that are somewhat radicalized that he brings in, or a scientist that he flies in, or these truck drivers. He enlists a few, Saudi American citizens to drive some trucks for him. What do you think about him as a villain and how he's operating on U.S. soil?
Right. So I think that he's an okay villain. He's not the best villain we've had. I would say he's on the weaker side of the villains. But obviously his plot was very good. So, he gets very close to getting his plot off, and it's very well thought out. I just, like I said, I mentioned before, I wanted a little bit more of... He almost seemed like a medium bad instead of like a big bad. We use that term, like this big bad, and I don't know. He seemed a little weak, and this is another thing that to follow up on this, we didn't have a super big political big bad, and the political big plot, unlike previous novels, was not, at least to me, I didn't think held up as well as it has in the past. So the question I spin to you off of that is, how did you feel about the political B plot in this novel?
Yeah, and I guess by that you mean the whole Peggy Steele, Attorney General Stokes, and Jones. The DNC chair and Valerie Jones working behind the scenes.
Yeah,
there were flashes of it that I thought were really smart, like when Jones, as the chief of staff, really starts sidelining Kennedy in the National Security Council meetings, and the president is kind of only listening to the other half of his cabinet. I'm starting to think, this is pretty this is good stuff. But overall, wasn't my favorite part of this book. Loved the book so much that if I were going to come up with some small critique or losers section, this might be it. So the political scheming, it wasn't Hank Clark. It kind of made me long for a Hank Clark maneuvering with senators and congressmen and manipulating the media, that, Machiavellianism, in Washington that we saw in the third option and separation of power. This wasn't it. So I don't know if you really liked it, but it was probably the weakest link in this novel, which is not saying much, because overall this is outstanding.
I think with both, what this novel does is it takes both like the terrorist, the big bad, and then the political big bad, and then tones them down a little bit and really lets the plot, the actual, terror plot, lead the way.
Yeah, it's true.
Unlike in Transfer of Power, where we have, I think Aziz is a great villain. I think he's probably one of the best villains we've had. Al-Yamani is not like that.
No.
And like you said, Stokes and Steele they're not Hank Clark, right? So it's like they're more of a combination, and then the plot itself of this nuke and having to foil not one but two nukes, it makes probably adds and makes for a better novel.
Speaking of freeing up the story so it can breathe by lessening the influence of characters, how do you feel that played with Anna being absent and her voice largely being sidelined here? Does that also allow the events, the plot, and the storyline to kind of flourish in a brighter way, not having her kind of holding Rapp back or having Rapp in the moment question himself? Is the story freer without her?
I think Vince definitely wanted to take a new line here, because that all three of the points we've just made, Anna, Hank, like a Hank Clark-esque character or a super intense villain, he had used those so often in the past 6 novels or 5 novels, whatever. And he went a different direction here. Completely avoids Anna. Rapp thinks about her 3 times, and we don't even see her in the scene in the epilogue. He's just there watching her water ski, right? And I think, by bringing her away really allows Rapp to flourish. Doesn't allow this stupid, we even mentioned one of the stupidest things about Transfer of Power was the whole, scene in the White House and getting her to sign this non-disclosure agreement.
You're a journalist?
Not hanging up. And then in a couple of the other novels, it's this relationship between him and being a journalist. And then obviously one of the reasons why we hated the last novel was because the best part of it was all a foil just to lead up to an argument between Mitch and Anna, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see on the reread, and really through this podcast, we're digesting these books a little bit more than what we did when we first read them. We see that Vince intentionally leaves Anna out of this novel.
Yeah.
And I think it's for, a good cause, a good reason.
You know what? It doesn't replace that, but you know what is allowed to come into that space a little more with less on Anna and Rapp's personal life?
Mm-hmm.
Irene's personal life. I really appreciated those couple of pages. Instead of hearing more about Anna and her background and BS, we got to see Kennedy I should be spending more time with Tommy. And there's this family reunion. I'm supposed to be there. I'm supposed to take him out there. To see her kind of having to contemplate family time and the sacrifices she's making was more refreshing than hearing Rapp over and over talking about sacrificing his new relationship with Anna and, his first year marriage. And having that shift to Irene just was refreshing, and it didn't dominate. It was just touched on here and there, but it was an important thing to have in the background that really shows her sacrifices for what she does. But she also, in the end, thankfully gets to go to the reunion and meet up and have some relaxing time. And Rap, meanwhile, is calling all the shots. So I like seeing that flipped on its head a little.
Yeah. And I think just the last point before we get to our thoughts on this half is, I want to say, like, Rap almost takes a back seat. He doesn't quite take a back seat because he's obviously fully ingrained in the action and the torture and stuff like that. But it's a little bit different form of Rap here. We see a lot more other characters, and we even like this. We don't see Scott and Co in this.
Yep.
The only mention to Scott, he doesn't even mention him by name. There's like this little offhand sentence where he's on the helicopter and he has some people from the CIA's like special SWAT team, and he's like, if I had more time, I would call like some.
I would have called in the boys,
contractors, and you know he's thinking about Scott and
the SEAL Demolition Company.
Yes, exactly.
Why? So do you think that's it? Do you think it was just time? This plot was moving so quick. Intelligence was coming in. They're having to make a plan on the fly. And that's why we don't see Coleman and crew and Hack and Strobel? Or do you think, again, that was a purposeful decision by Vince that he didn't want them to be there, the ones who saved the day with Rap the whole time? He wanted Jack Warch or Skip McMahon to kind of play a role, and, you know, the DOE team to get their page time instead of just having Coleman come in and, you know, clean up.
Yeah. I think it's a conscious decision to build the universe, have more players. I think things get stale if you keep using the same characters. It's like the same comp. You can think of, like, I don't know. Again, I've been watching Marvel movies and comic books, and, you know, why in like Captain America, when he's having to deal with, I think it's in Winter Soldier, right? And there's these three characters. Like, where is Iron Man? You know?
Yeah.
And when you're reading the novels, when you're reading like a comic book, oftentimes what they would do is there would be this little blurb that would say, you know, Iron Man is away, like doing something.
Is off on another planet. Yeah.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is like Vince's way of saying, you know, he really wanted to focus on Rap and these characters from the DOE. He wanted to focus on the FBI. And Skip, you know, because he even mentions that Skip is going to retire, so maybe this is this might be one of the last times we see Skip for a while.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's the bulk of it, but I would also say the pacing just didn't allow for it, where Rap was acting on intelligence every minute to minute, things coming in. Oh, and then there was also that conversation in Virginia of them wanting to rely on the local police. As soon as you start bringing in these other parties that don't know the lay of the land, that don't know the locals, don't know the roads, I thought Rap's thing here was also, let's let the locals do their job and do it well, and we'll kind of be hovering, you know, in the background, ready to jump in when needed. Hey, so let's start wrapping things up with a couple of our favorites. I think we talked a lot about winners and losers, so we don't need to spend too much time, but we gotta always ask, what's your favorite action scene now that we finished the whole book, Chris?
So if I had to pick just this half, it would be the helicopter, the takedown of the boat. But I just still think that the Pakistan scene from the first half is the best action in the entire novel.
It's true. That raid was great. The boat interception on the Potomac was just, couldn't put it down. Like I said, middle of the night, that kept me up. It was one of my favorite scenes. So yeah, definitely my favorite of this half. Well, I think we'll both agree Flynn is the winner here. This book is, you said last time you really thought it leveled up his writing. I think it kickstarts the series into another gear. It definitely puts it on another plane, and we're going to keep riding that wave with Consent to Kill. So the biggest winner of this is Vince, and where he takes these stories. I just think he's setting a new bar here. He's really up in his game with this one. Yeah,
and it was hard to pick a loser. I didn't really have a loser. Obviously, we mentioned we don't really like the B plot with the political B plot. But I guess if you had to pick a loser, it's Anna, because like she's the loser because Vince leaves him out and realizes that we don't need her as a character anymore. So
yeah, and things free up and become a lot easier to work with without her in the background. Well, that is a little foreshadowing there for next month. All right, final ratings, Chris. What do you give it?
I give this my first solid A 9.4, 9.5, whatever. Definitely this is in the top 5. When I was rereading it, I texted you and I was like, man, this book is so good.
So good.
And I haven't felt that way since we reread Transfer of Power. So
true. Yep, I'm with you. I'm giving it a solid straight A, 9.8. I wanted to hit that 10 mark, but came as close as you possibly could.
Got to leave room for improvement.
Got to leave room for more. So at 9.8, this is easily in anybody who reads Mitch Rapp in their top 5.
For sure.
I would find it hard to argue with somebody who's saying it's not in the top 5. And
get out of here. Get out of here.
Get out of here. What are you smoking? And for me, I'm right now, I'm going to say it's my favorite in the series. It's number 1. Now, after I get a refresher next month on Consent to Kill, or down the road a few months, American Assassin, we'll see where I'm at. But this one has it all for me. So this one is pushing, and I think it might hold on to that top spot. But
ooh, intriguing.
Yeah, we got a lot of more books to go.
All right, so our much anticipated, it is time. Our favorites, I think my favorite section of these podcasts, the covers. Okay, so we're recording this a little bit early because of my thesis defense. Normally we would have some polling data on what you guys think is your favorite cover. So we don't have this time, but
yeah,
sure.
Can I just jump in and show you a couple of unique things here? So
yeah, of course.
Did you notice F and G were a little out of the blue? And for anybody, like Chris was just saying, we're going to post this on the social media, but I found the Croatian version. Don't know why that popped up on Goodreads, but we've got the Croatian version, and I had to translate. Their title is Remembrance Day, which maybe makes sense. A lot of countries, particularly European ones, have a Memorial Day or Remembrance Day as an alternate name. And then the Bulgarian version, again, don't know why, but it's one that I found. And I kind of like this. The Bulgarian version translates the title to The Day of the Apocalypse.
Oh, I like that. I like that title.
Yeah, and then this one might be even better. I found the German cover, and I didn't put it initially because it looks similar to the first edition of...
Yeah, it's very similar to the first edition.
The blue, original cover with the CIA seal at the middle. But I didn't even realize the title's different. In German... I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but it translates to The Danger.
That's a good title.
Yeah, so I'm like The Danger or Day of the Apocalypse. Both of those could have been pretty good titles for this one.
So what is your, out of all the covers that we post, what's your favorite, what's singing to you? What cover do you like the best?
All right. I like the OG, like I was just saying, cover A. It's got those nice blue tones, almost like a gunmetal-y kind of metallic blue. It's got the CIA seal in the middle with a tear going right to the core and the heart of it. And I love how the tear is also, it has these like metal sharp edges. Like, if you open something with a can opener and you're kind of screwing with it and getting frustrated, at the end it's going to have all these little there's probably a name for them, but these little sharp edges sticking out. I just think that's a baller cover.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorites. I also like the, I think it's the rebrand, one of the rebrands, and it's often a running man, but this time the guy is standing still in front of the Washington Monument. Standing man. But we have to talk about it. We always have one. There's always at least one. But this time it's a little different.
So no power lines. They cut the power lines. Somebody must have been listening to us, but what did they replace it with, Chris?
They replace it with some barbed wire.
Barbed wire in the middle of a field. Again, it's like in Kansas or something. This is like the Midwest edition. They're trying to sell this on the Great Plains. I don't get it. It's a wide open field, no one around, a dude carrying a duffel bag next to barbed wire fence. Like keeping the cows at pasture or something. What's in that duffel bag?
The only thing I
pack a duffel bag.
So every time I see the cover that I hate the most, I try to think, what were they thinking? Obviously, they didn't read the fucking novel, which really frustrates me. But if I had to place myself, what scene are they trying to get here? The only thing I can think about is the scene where they're in Pakistan and they take the terrorists to this farm. There's pigs and stuff, and maybe that's the bag that
interrogation
has some interrogation stuff. You know, that's the only thing I could think of. It's a stretch, not the scene that I would have picked. You know, you could have had something with like, I guess you don't want to spoil the whole thing of like a nuke. You don't want to have like a radiation symbol or whatever. But
yeah,
could have had like some helicopters or
the bridge, dude. Can you imagine the helicopters and the boat behind the bridge for the interception scene, the takedown? That would have been nasty.
We need to team up with Kyle or somebody. And although his covers have been decent at least,
yeah, that's true. Some of his have been really.
If we're not consulted on the next rebrand, if we're not consulted on the next rebrand, like I'm going to be very, very pissed. Very pissed.
Hey, you mentioned D is pretty nice though. So let's give him some cred because D is nice. Like you said, the standing man. He's a silhouette on the Washington Monument. He's flanked by these 2 American flags. I guess the bomb was supposed to go off downtown. The World War II memorial is not.
Mitch
far
is
from
never
here.
at the Washington Monument.
I know
that's
he's
my problem
never at
with
the
it.
monument.
That's my problem with they're nice and they look aesthetically pleasing, but he's never there.
He's also got a pop collar. You see that? What's with that?
Yeah, I think most of the Running Mans have pop. They're like
usually
trench
have
coats, popped collars.
Right.
Like
that's right.
Pisses me off.
I don't know, man. The angle's kind of cool, though. It's kind of shot down below his feet, looking up. So you see the whole very imposing monument and the imposing silhouette, pretty much dominating the monument. So it's artistically well. You know what? That always happens. We always have a cover we just like. It's good. We have one that we like the design, and it looks really cool, but it doesn't match the story. And then we always have cover C. I'm just going to start calling it cover C. We're just going to shit on cover C every time. Either power lines or now barbed wire. So
I can't wait for the next one.
We're seeing some trends here. Great book, though. And that wraps us up. So you want to tell us, Chris, what we're covering next week on the podcast? A little collaboration going on.
Yes. We very excited to announce we're going to be dropping a collaboration pod with our friend Brian from the podcast called Comms Majors. That's a podcast where they break down movies, right?
Yep. And Brian is a fellow Mitrap ambassador and fellow podcaster.
Yes. So Mike reached out to him and said, hey, would you be willing to team up in the future? Hopefully we can get him back on when we do the American Assassin movie.
Yes.
But yeah, we figured we'd start it off. We had just released 2 weeks ago, right? Or a couple weeks ago, interview with Andy McDermott and his short movie Mitrap Off Book. So we're going to be watching that and discussing that with Brian. So excited to be bringing that to you guys next week.
We've done a couple of films on this show, so maybe excited to get a real film critic, someone who has their own podcast about film reviews. So maybe that's something we can keep going in the future.
Yeah. All right. So we did at the top. Let's do it at the end. We got to thank our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Roman, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, and Jeff. We said it earlier, but again, please subscribe, rate, and review us using your favorite podcasting platform. Find us online at mitrappod.com or our Twitter handle at mitrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.